panel for you. So whilst I announce everybody's names, if I could ask the panellists to all come up and take a seat. Craig is going to stay with us from Virgin Atlantic. Torry Ostby, the CFO of Norwegian Air Shuttle, also joins us. AJ Singh, the chairman and MD of SpiceJet. Stephen Greenway, the CEO of Reward You and previously deputy CEO of Scoot over in Singapore. Gareth Evans, the CEO of Qantas International, is with us, I hope. Might be joining us. And also waiting for Ish from JetBlue. I just said there we go. There we have. Come and take a seat, Gareth. Just in time approach. Very good. Quick turnaround. Right, so we have almost everybody we were looking for. In fact, perhaps that was my mistake, not JetBlue. So let's proceed then to explore, and this is a great panel to do it with because we have all kinds of voices from the aviation industry represented here. Let's explore just how full-service carriers can compete long-haul with low costs. And Torry, it's great to meet you, and thank you for joining us on the panel. I wanted to ask you first, do you think the full-service carriers can compete with you on these long-haul routes?
Is this on?
Oh, yes, if you've not got a mic, in which case?
No, I don't.
Go for it.
Yeah, I think the model has proven to work now. We started up in 2013, and we had actually we had our first profitable year in 2015. So even with a very small scale, profit came quite quick to our operations. Right now we're scaling it up, so we're building quite heavily. But it's based on the same ideas as low-cost short haul. You have to turn around the aircraft. You have to fly point to point. You have to have an aircraft that actually provides the right cost structure. So apart from that, it's just execution. So I think we're growing the market, and we're living quite well together with the legacy carriers.
Yes. Is that what you say in public, Craig? It's a very different story behind the scenes. You know, they grow the pie for everybody to share. Is that the way it really feels? Oh, sorry. Yeah, Craig, yes.
Look, the answer is, yeah, it kind of does. And look, we have to, as I discussed a few minutes ago, you know, our job is to, we're never afraid of competition. Virgin Atlantic was created to be a competitor to the existing airlines 34 years ago. And what we have found is when we compete and we offer the right combination of price and value, our loads stay relatively the same. And so the answer is what's left must be growth. That's ending up going to the other carriers because we're still able, we think, to compete successfully.
Gareth, how do you find it over at Qantas, competing with the low cost? And you have the added advantage, I suppose, of having a low cost operation within your business that you can watch and learn from.
Yeah, so we operate a two-brand strategy, both domestically and internationally. So Jetstar last year, which is the Qantas low-cost brand, carried 36 million passengers, and 24 million of those were for less than $100. So it's really is stimulating the market. Now, a lot of that was domestic Australia, but it really does stimulate the market. And we deploy those brands based on where we see the customer preference to be. And you can segment the market using the two brands. In fact, we have a number of routes where both brands operate, and Hawaii is one and Bali is another. And because on those markets there is a premium level of, they're very leisure markets, there's not much, there's no corporate travel, but there is a premium leisure demand and there is a price sensitive leisure demand, and the two brands are able to stratify the market.
The kind of markets you wish there were business requirements to visit, but there aren't.
That's right, yes. Not too much business travel. A little bit to Honolulu maybe, but not very much.
Try hard to find them, perhaps. And Gareth, you don't find that there's cannibalization then between these two brands, because that was the experience of some low-cost operations started up by full-service carriers on the short-haul side many years ago, and they've learned a lot since.
Yeah, and yeah, we've seen that and we can understand that, but I think as the model for us has matured, the two brands clearly stand for different things. And in the customer's mind, they are clearly differentiated. In fact, probably half of Australians don't know that Jetstar is owned by Qantas. And so the level of cannibalisation, if you get the balance right, is very, very small indeed. Yeah. So on Bali, for instance, it's mainly Jetstar with a little bit of Qantas. On Honolulu, it's pretty much a 50-50 mix, and we tweak and adjust depending on what we see from a customer demand perspective in those different stratifications.
Stephen, how do you think that the full-service airlines should compete then with the low cost? Because it seems to me they have a choice to differentiate the business more with more luxury, more frills, or to compete on the low cost. But what I'm hearing today is actually you can do both.
Can do both, but my experience with scooters, they just tend to discount heavily in the back, using the front as subsidy. So, you're seeing a lot of heavy discounting. I mean, I remember when I moved to Singapore to start scooting 2011, I think the average fare to Singapore, Sydney was about 800, 900 Singapore dollars. By the time I'd left, it was about 500. And the 500 was coming from BA. They had that sort of one-legger down to Sydney and so forth. So they were very effectively competing on price against the long-haul low-cost carriers. They were using the front end of their planes to subsidise the back end for the most part, to take the fight to you. So that was the issue that we have in long-haul low-cost doesn't have a premium carrier, cabin to offset the heavy discounting down the back.
AJ, you got any thoughts on how the full-service carriers compete with the low cost? I mean, we're talking mostly here about long haul, which maybe your airline doesn't do so much of now, although we hear rumblings. We can talk about that too, if you like. But what are your thoughts on how the two sit side by side?
We find this extremely intriguing, the whole proposition of low-cost long haul. India is 1.3 billion people, and very few of them fly today. Just 30 million of them fly. We have 100 million air trips. We are the fastest growing aviation market in the world. We are growing 20% every year. We have 57 million Indians, 40 million Indians that fly overseas, back and forth. So it's a terrifically under-penetrated market. The low-cost model has shown that you can grow the market, at least the short-haul low-cost model has shown that just, 10 years ago, there was no low-cost short-haul at all. It was all full service. And when we started our airline in 2005, we were told we didn't have a hope in hell to survive in that market. And today, low-cost is 80% of the market. So we find it terrifically intriguing. We think that if you can really work the math and find a way in which you can actually bring down cost, India is an extremely price-sensitive market. And we have a lot of people, so and they want to travel. So if we can find a way to stimulate that market and get the cost down, you will just have a terrific explosion out of India flying long haul. So we are looking at it as an airline. We fly to 7 or 8 countries already, but these are all relatively short haul, 3-hour, 4-hour sort of journeys. Is there a way in which we can get fuel efficient wide body planes at a reasonable cost? So that we can pack them with seats and take them across the world. If the math works, we'll certainly try it. And
Yes.
And we are talking to the aircraft makers and trying to learn from the experiences of Norwegian and others to see what works and what doesn't. But one thing is for sure, that there is potential if we can get the new planes, the 787-1000s or the A350s, the new versions. If we can get them at a price point which makes sense for us to deploy them, we will certainly look at it. It's
How far
extremely
away
interesting.
into the future is this project?
Well, we are working with both the aircraft makers at this time, and hopefully it's not as far away as you might imagine.
Gareth, have you been surprised at how quickly this has grown about? I mean, many years people watched airlines try this long-haul, low-cost, and it didn't work. And then all of a sudden it did because the maths changed, because the aircraft changed. And then I ask this because I wonder how quickly it can grow. What are the expectations in the industry?
I suppose my response to that is it doesn't appear to have been that quickly from our point of view. No, Jetstar's 13 years old now, and it started international flying 11 years ago. So we've been flying to Honolulu with the Jetstar model for 11 years. It's developed over that period of time, and of course the model gets refined and efficiencies get built in, but it's not new. It might be new to other parts of the world,
Yes,
but
I
it's
suppose
certainly...
maybe I'm being too European about it. So I was being told by Michael O'Leary how it wouldn't work for so long, and then Norwegian has started it anyway.
Obviously, there's some disruption going on in other parts of the world. In our part of the world, it's been around a long time, and the model is proven on the right markets.
Stephen, then your experience at Scoot from when you were there and now at UFly, alliances, is this something that low-cost airlines can use to their advantage just in the same way as full-service airlines have? Because they're typically independent-minded beasts, low-cost airlines.
They are, but I mean, the economic principles of flying long haul, be it full service or low cost, don't really change. In most cases, as sort of Gareth said, it sort of works on specific markets. There's very few markets that you can operate on a point-to-point basis with 400 seats a day. On a long haul route. And so from that perspective, you need feed. One of the reasons why UFly Alliance was created was to be able to aggregate feed out of Hong Kong and other ports and feed into other airlines. Scoot was very much the same. I mean, the alliance with Tiger, which then turned into a full acquisition of Tiger, so we would have the short haul network feeding into the long haul network, is a classic example. And now they're taking that one step further and basically copying Qantas and Jetstar, which is code sharing and having people from full service going on to low cost and vice versa to be able to support the feed and the traffic on the network. So it's absolutely key.
Tori, at Norwegian, how much do you consider your relationships with other airlines before you make strategic decisions? Do you consider partnerships?
Up till now, the model is based on the point-to-point direct, and that's actually what's driving the market, and that's how we kind of look on a business case before we launch a route. But the fact is that our long-haul operations out of Gatwick have 40% feed. So we can feed ourselves, our own network, in our own short-haul network, feed our long-haul operations in Gatwick, as an example. And of course, then we could look at the map and see who could it be possible to interline or cooperate with. So I believe feeding is a way for us to fill up the last 10% of the aircraft, but it's not kind of the basis for the business case.
And AJ's already, in terms of where this can grow next, AJ, did you want to say something about the importance of partnerships? But yeah.
Well, I mean, it's not a nice thing to say, but we really don't have any partners. And we've been flying for the last 26 months with a load factor in excess of 93%. So I think, just the sheer demographics of our country and the population of our country enables us to feed our own planes and keep them full. When you're flying 93%, it means that pretty much every flight that you're flying is full, because there are some outliers out there. As we grow, of course, and as we look at long-haul operations, we certainly will look for partners, because there will be a challenge the other way around. I mean, we can feed, we can put in a lot of people from our side, but from the other side, you might need more partners and so on, and we will explore that. But I think, again, terrific opportunity. We need to work with the aircraft makers to make sure that the price points of these planes are appropriate and that they have new technology, and in terms of fuel burn, they burn less fuel. So as long as you can make that happen, and as long as you're not stuck with the old 777s and so on, we think that we have a shot of making it work.
You mentioned the strong growth that we could see in the Indian market for low-cost long haul. Do you think regulatory barriers would stop others from coming into the market?
Well, India will do what the world is doing. For the longest time, Dubai has been a de facto Indian hub. So that's not something that's desirable in the long run. We need to create our own hubs. Mumbai and Delhi and Bangalore and Hyderabad will become international hubs. And you will want your own carriers to take long-haul traffic and not have to take it through the Gulf countries, whether to take it through Abu Dhabi or Qatar or Dubai. And in the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen that there has been an increasing realization that we must try and build our own hubs, and just not allow open skies, because that's what everybody is asking us to do. We need to make sure that we have our own aviation industry. We have this terrific opportunity right now where the market is growing so fast that we can create our own airlines, which are significant global airlines. we can create our own hubs, and we can create our own aviation infrastructure
Yes.
within India. So I think there'll be a balance. It's not that we will suddenly open up our skies, but the direction is much more to encourage the Indian aviation sector to get up to speed as soon as possible.
I'm not sure if Tim Clark from Emirates is still here to hear your thoughts on the Dubai
Yes, and
operation.
he's having a lot of problem, of course, because India has shut the doors on them for
Right.
the last 2 or 3 years.
Which is partly what prompted,
yes,
prompted my question. Gareth, when you look at the growth, obviously India, one area, China, Japan, where is still left to grow? Because when you look at your map, it looks busy already.
Yeah, it is pretty busy. And obviously Asia is a huge growth market. Everybody knows that in many, many industries. I think for us, the way we look at it is we don't have to fly everywhere. We don't have to be everywhere. And today we're in Australia, New Zealand, we're in Singapore, we're in Vietnam, we're in Japan. And we can connect up those networks quite easily. We do fly into China from Singapore, from Vietnam, and from Japan. We're working through what sort of model might work for us in China. So far, from a Jetstar point of view, sorry, I'll put my Jetstar hat on. I'm about to change jobs to go from the CEO of Qantas to the CEO of Jetstar, so I'm having to use we and then we and them in the same sentence. But Jetstar has just started a new inbound flight from Zhengzhou to Melbourne on a charter basis. So that model right now is going to work really well for us from a long-haul, low-cost perspective. But over time, I'm sure that will evolve. China's a huge market, but it's very, very difficult to penetrate. And I don't think you can, as a non-Chinese business, penetrating on your own is virtually impossible. You're going to need a partner in order to do it.
Yeah, Craig, when you look at, there's the likes of Norwegian doing low-cost long-haul, but there are other names, and they seem to be coming up fast. There's Level, there's the Air France one, and you've recently done your deal with Air France. Does this give you relationships with low-cost long-haul businesses then?
So any Air France, including their low-cost initiative flight that goes between Europe and North America is in fact part of our joint venture. So I guess in some ways it does. But I think the point I made at the beginning still stands. We look for growth opportunities that make sense from a full-service airlines perspective, and doing so knowing that we're likely to have low fares in the economy cabin to compete with whoever might be in the marketplace, and focus then on what do we do to differentiate our product and our service so that customers feel they've had a Virgin experience, even if they've paid a very low fare. And I think for us, that's always going to be the key to competing. And we've done enough to get the company more efficient and to create more sources of feed onto our airplanes that the combination of those things can work for us and work for our customers.
Okay, now in our session this morning, we had lots of questions that had to go unanswered because I didn't leave enough time. So we will leave more time today. If you'd like to ask questions over Twitter, then the hashtag is #AviationFest. But please don't be shy. Please feel free to ask questions in person. I see one hand's up over there and one hand there. If we just wait for a microphone. If we go down to this corner over here. Is that John? Yes, there we go. Get a microphone over here. And then we'll have one in the middle somewhere in just a moment.
Can you hear me?
Keep trying.
Can you hear me?
There we go.
Okay. Yeah, John Strickland from Jealous Consulting. A couple of questions picking up on themes that you've covered already. The thing that I wrestle with is this challenge of feed. Legacy airlines have been trying to get out of short-haul networks because they have a dead weight to feed the long haul. And low-cost carriers, of course, have made that a source of profit in its own right. So how do you avoid that same challenge if you are low-cost long-haul and short-haul together, that you're not carrying the dead weight if you need to top up because load factors are not there year-round? And as a supplement to that, if you are going to work with another airline partner, for example, Norwegian, looking to work with an airline like Ryanair, how can you tackle the challenge of each partner making enough money from the ticket price? Because when you share out the revenue, generally the long-haul carrier gets the lion's share, the short-haul carrier may not get very much on leading prices, and you come back to the problem again of why would anybody do it if they're not going to make money?
Who would you like that to go to? Or
I think perhaps Norwegian first, and maybe Stephen, if you could come in on that one as well.
Okay.
I think to start with the last question, I think if you want to go into business partnership, which it really is, both have to make money on it. So forget about old kind of models where you divide by kilometers or whatever. You have to make money on it. It's got to be fruitful, then both partners can do it. So I think it's a very good idea to connect, and it's nothing new. It's just a way to do business together. So we're not going to build up, probably not going to build up a network in Asia, but a partner like Jetstar would be perfect for us. And in the US, we would like to have feed in the US as well. So you will see us work on that in the future. So we don't think that our model is very different from others. It's just a new way of setting up routes, growing the market where you haven't had direct routes.
Have you
before.
approached Jetstar, or is this something new?
No, it's an example, and but of course,
It's a new deal that's happening right now.
Jetstar is here, so
There we go.
it's natural.
Breaking news. Stephen, did you want to pick up on that?
Okay, so on terms of short haul network, you're very legacy thinking, John. If you're talking about short haul to long haul in the LCC space, typically, your short haul is your point-to-point network anyway. Typically, it's quite profitable. I mean, it's a true LCC model. If you look at AirAsia to AirAsia X, I think it's at the moment about 35% of traffic interlines between the two carriers, but it's always been make your short haul work as a profitable standalone point-to-point entity, and anything on top of that is cream. It's icing on the cake, and that gets transferred over to your long haul operation. So, and that's what you saw with Tiger and Scoot. The problem that we had is that Tiger was Singapore Phuket was doing very well for them. We would like to be able to take people from Sydney, Singapore to Phuket, and we could never get a decent price because they were selling it as a point-to-point, and they were optimizing that route to make sure it was a standalone profitable route. So that's the first thing. Second thing is in terms of pricing going forward, I would probably agree. It needs to be sum of sectors. You've got a price, I've got a price. We've both got to make money. Now the issue with that is you can't coordinate prices in that. In terms of what he charges and what I charge. What we used to do with Tiger was just do summer sectors all the time, and when we wanted a lead-in price, I'd do an O&D. I'd file one O&D that would be a price point that I could go out and advertise. It's not ideal, it's not perfect, but that's where it is at the moment. I do know that Scoot and Tiger now, it's now Scoot. They're moving well and truly into the legacy space in terms of O&D. It's no longer point-to-point. So that's the priority at the moment.
We had a question here, this in the white jacket.
Is it working? Yes,
Yes.
perfect. I would have a question for Mr. Evans. My name's Sandra. I'm from Vienna, working for Austrian Airlines. You mentioned earlier this morning that Qantas is premium and that you're proud of that. So in your opinion, what minimum products and services have to be offered for an airline to be considered premium?
It's a good question. I think it's in the eye of the customer, really. I think what's important from our model is that the two brands stand for clearly different things, and there's not a blurring of the lines in between. So for us, we have Qantas there as the premium airline. It's not about unbundling the product. Other premium carriers have done that. We have not done that. It's about a fully joined up offering with, seats, meals, baggage, service, all of that included. And Jetstar is a low-cost offering aligned to the offering that other low-cost carriers have in the market, albeit that, again, there's shades of that as well. Jetstar has a business class, as some other low-cost carriers do. Jetstar has a lot of partnerships, as some other low-cost carriers do. But at the end of the day, the definition of what's premium and what's low-cost is actually in the mind of the customer, and you've just got to have brands that clearly stand for for different things.
A lot of hybrids these days. We've got a microphone just over here, so let's go here.
Hi, I'm Ira from VChain Technology. I'm hearing a lot of this. We have to fly further, do more, not compromise the service, and we need technology to enable that delivery. How do you guys make sure that you get access to the innovation? Because it is David versus Goliath, and we went through the IG program, got investment. I know Qantas had a program recently, but I'd like to hear particularly from Craig and from Gareth as well about that.
Did you get that? The acoustic's not great, so it's how you get access to the innovation.
Yeah, how do you make sure that you go further, still deliver a stellar service, don't compromise on it, and somehow stretch yourself even more? A lot of the times, the answer is technology. How do you find this? How do you implement this? How do you go out and find the companies?
How do you find the new technology you need to compete better?
I don't think there's a simple, ready-made answer about innovation. And so if I could take a minute to talk about innovation in the airline industry generally, the natural inclination is to think it's always technology. And actually, innovation is about just a new solution to a specific problem. Technology is often an enabler, but actually some of the best innovation that comes from people working together in your company is not necessarily technology related. So I'll share a story, if I may, that doesn't answer your question very directly, but answers how we think about innovation, which I'm going to take to be the essence of the question. We had a problem, if you will, in that we looked at customer journey information, and it said the low emotional point for our customer's journey was the hold rooms at Heathrow Airport. Now, for those of you who've flown long haul from Heathrow, you kind of go through security, and then you get called to the gate, and then you sit in a room, dark like this. If you're lucky, you may be able to see a jet bridge out one window. And otherwise, it's plain and it is not a virgin experience by any stretch of the imagination. And so we tasked a team with figuring out, what can we do to change this experience? And a team came from different parts of the organization with different ideas and different thoughts. And I thought they'd come up with some ideas like put a coffee shop in or do some things that we'd have to debate whether it was worth it to spend the money to do so. And after a couple of weeks, they came back and they said, we're going to delay calling people to the flight for 15 minutes. And I said, what? And they said, the correct answer for how do we change this experience is we don't put people in the hold room. Frankly, anything called a hold room is actually a pretty bad starting point for a good customer experience. But airlines like to know that the people are there so that when it's time to board, you have everyone present so that you don't end up having to go find people or pull their bags if they're not there. So this idea that you would call people to the gate 15 minutes later, and the idea by doing it 15 minutes later, people would kind of come and they'd go straight onto the airplane. You would have already started boarding, no one would have to sit in this area, and of course we were quite nervous that that might lead to delays. So we tested it at one gate, and then we tested it at two, and then we tested it at 2 airports, and then pretty soon it became our standard MO, and we saw our ratings rise for that part of the journey by 25 points. On a scale of 100. I mean, it was a big improvement. And the answer is the innovation came not by somebody sitting in some room inventing a new technology. It came by actually having a well-articulated problem and a bunch of people with different perspectives to bring to it.
Did you use technology? I'm interested. You talked about the low emotional point in the journey. Did you use technology to establish when they were low emotionally, or was that more of a sort of? I asked because
no, that was a customer survey. That was customer survey data.
Because we spoke to JetBlue this morning, and they were referring to the information you can get from social media about how people are feeling about an experience whilst they're in the middle of it. So
we do track that information, but I think people have come to expect so little from that part of the journey they wouldn't even tweet about it.
Right.
Right. And it's just negative.
Yes.
And I think we've done a lot of things with technology as well. We tried Sony Watch or Apple Watches originally. No, not Apple Watch. We tried a Sony Watch originally. We also tried Google Glass as a means of getting our customer service agents at our premium check-in out from behind the counter, so they could be taking customers' bags and talking to them at the same time. And technology, it may be now that Apple has had the watch for a little while, this will change. But when we tried the watch solution, so you could look at your watch and you could see what gate the person was leaving from, whether it was on time, what the weather was at the destination, all that kind of stuff. And it turns out that this is the universal symbol for I'm bored with you, which is not a great customer service proposition for us. So technology isn't always the answer. Sometimes the answer actually is rethinking the problem.
Sometimes looking face to face. Anybody else want to pick up on that theme of as you try to compete with low cost long-haul competition, where you go to find the new technology. We talked with JetBlue this morning about setting up their own VC to try and encourage innovation. And I know we've got people around on the panel who've got partnerships out into sort of quite innovative places. But anyway, if no one wants to pick up on that, we'll move on to oh, there we go.
I can just have a quick comment to it. You don't get away even if you're a low-cost, long-haul or short-haul operator. You have to have the same kind of customer experience. So we have the same requirements, at least minimum requirements from customers. So we need to kind of work on the same issues, even with the low-cost product.
Yeah. Do you try to keep people out of the depressing holding rooms?
I haven't heard that one, but it's a good idea.
Yeah, there'll be pot plants everywhere now. I can just see it. That'll be the solution. Let's go to Twitter then. Hashtag AviationFest if you want to pose a question to the panel. Staring into your crystal balls, which I know you're all carrying with you, which carrier will be the next to branch into the long-haul, low-cost market, apart from maybe SpiceJet, which we've already talked about. Anybody got any thoughts or as to where that new long-haul, low-cost challenge comes from? I mean, Norwegian, you might be thinking of some new places to go.
Yeah, we have launched a lot of new routes and new places to go. The problem is, of course, you need to see a continued deregulation of the whole industry and the markets, and market access and overflight rights, and those kind of issues stops the opportunities and creates a lot of problems for the customers and limits your opportunities to grow. But we've been able, that forced us to move out and set up different operating licenses to get traffic rights and move our airliner into Europe.
Yes.
But the market is opening up. We're seeing a lot of growth opportunities.
Gareth, have you found that regulation has been a barrier then? I mean, to Jetstar, have you come up against this? Because we heard about that from AJ in the Indian context.
Yes.
Perennially
in
an issue.
one word. You've got to work it. I mean, we're operating in 4 different jurisdictions with different regulatory environments, with different ownership regimes. And the challenge for us is to try and have a level of commonality and consistency across all of that. That is difficult to achieve, and is a big challenge at times. We have, though, managed to overcome one of the barriers that we are actually able to sell the whole network as a joined-up network. So we have that ATI approval right across the Jetstar network, and that was a big step forward because we can now sell pretty much the whole of Asia in one itinerary if we need to.
Stephen?
Not on the regulatory.
Yep.
Not on the regulatory front. On the who's starting up. My CEO of Hong Kong Express just said the other day he's going to buy long-haul aircraft without telling me publicly. But anyway, so we are. So Hong Kong Express it is coming at it a different way, and I think Gareth's probably familiar with this. Is that most of the airports in Asia are jammed up now. You can't get slots for love or money. So we have a particularly acute problem in Hong Kong, where Hong Kong Express has grown from nothing to 20 aircraft in 2-3 years. They still have growth ambitions. We won't get a third runway until we've been told 2023. I don't believe that. I can see them building it, but runways always tend to go over budget and over schedule. So the only way that Hong Kong Express can go is gauge up. They've already moved to 230-seat 321s. And now we're looking at wide-body aircraft. So where they're doing 4 services a day to Osaka, they strip back to 2 or 3, replace the wide bodies, frees up a slot, and you put something else onto a new destination. Asia also is particularly acute in the model in so much as even with the 321s that we've got, we can't get to Bali. We can't get to Sapporo, and certain times of the year we barely get into Narita. So Asia, just geographically, is a challenge for a short-haul, low-cost carrier because you miss a huge amount of the market out. I mean, when I started Peach, the frustrating thing for me was I couldn't get down from Osaka to Bangkok. I couldn't get to Thailand. I'd run out of fuel. And so all of these things were incredibly frustrating for me because there was a lot of markets I wanted to penetrate that I just simply couldn't get to. So I think that in Asia, you've got a combination of factors. You typically, Hong Kong, you can't get a slot for love or money. And then you've got the geographical issue that you basically can't get to half of the market with narrow-body, short-haul aircraft. So I think that's, if I'm mentioning right, Hong Kong Express announced the other day they're going to buy some ultimately buy some wide-body aircraft, but it's not necessarily to go to long haul. It's more just to be able to serve the region more effectively and actually make use of the slots that they've got better in Hong Kong.
Okay, so some very interesting conversation around your question about where that growth might come from. Right here on the front row.
Thank you. Victoria Moores with Air Transport World. It's a general question for the whole of the panel. There's a sub-question for Norwegian on when we might see some of these connecting partnerships. But the overall question is, there used to be a perception that short-haul low-cost carriers had different passengers to traditional network carriers. And now if you look at those passengers, they're the same passengers pretty much. So business travelers now are able to fly with the low-cost carriers under their corporate travel policies. There aren't the kind of limitations where people were questioning safety before. So now they're the same group of people. And yet, with the generation of long-haul low-cost carriers, there seems to be that same perception again that these are different creatures that fly with long-haul low-cost carriers. Do you agree with that or not?
I'm happy to start. Since you asked a yes or no question, I can be very brief. No. Well, I'm not sure what I'm agreeing with. I don't see them as different customers.
Define the question.
I've never seen them as different customers. The same person who flies a long haul for business to New York one day might be going short haul to Spain for leisure with their family and economy on a low-cost carrier tomorrow. And I've never seen it as unique markets. I think it's always been one of the realities of our business that people travel for different purposes to different locations and seek different experiences and different products as a consequence. And I see it as one big market.
I'd have to agree. I mean, Scoot had, well, the SQ group had the same policy as Qantas. So we just copied them. But it's a dual brand strategy. You obviously have a premium brand in terms of SQ, and you have a low-cost brand in terms of Scoot. And our first route was Sydney, and I remember the press were going, why the hell are you going to Sydney? SQ's got 4 services a day. This is ridiculous. I mean, what's your strategy? And the strategy was you wanted to cover both ends of the market. To the other point is that I always used to laugh because I'd go on our flights and so forth, and I'd act as crew, and you could see the bag tags, and there would be PPS members, BA Gold, equivalent of BA Gold, working on. So, and you go and have a conversation with them, and sure enough, I travel SQ for my business purposes, and my company's paying. And when I'm traveling with the 3 kids and the maid and the wife, I'm traveling low cost. I'm not paying for anything. So, in that it encapsulates the beauty of the model that you're covering both ends of the spectrum. You're capturing all of that. If we hadn't done that, we probably would have lost those passengers to another airline or another destination. So, working in unison as a group, it's incredibly powerful from that perspective.
We see exactly the same. So we know who a lot of our customers are. We know where they're frequent flyers. We know when they're flying on Qantas or when they're flying on Jetstar, and they make a choice depending on what sort of journey they're undertaking and what sort of brand they want to fly with. And as I said before, the brands clearly stand for something different. We don't see in our markets, you sort of mentioned in the question around corporates trading down, we see very little of that. We see the corporates sticking on the premium brand for their own reasons, very little trade down to the leisure brand.
Yeah, in Europe maybe a different
we
experience.
actually had a very interesting experience in India. We had a situation where people are both price conscious and they are status conscious as well. So what happens is that people who are going on full service airlines and had to fly business class because they were status conscious suddenly came onto low cost and said, look, it doesn't matter here because you can fly, you can be on any seat, and it really doesn't matter. So you actually had a lot of people shift from full service carriers to low cost carriers because they could actually spend less money and not care about which section they were flying in.
Right.
So India is extremely price conscious, and people really don't care whether they're flying full service
Get away from the
it's the same guys flying anywhere all the time anyway. And I suspect the same thing will happen in long haul as well.
I just want to make room for one more question, and then we are going to have to wrap up. But this one through on Twitter. To what extent does low-cost long haul rely on low oil prices? When I left my desk this morning, we were either side of 50 on WTI and Brent, and I'm not sure on jet fuel. But you'll tell me. Let me ask you, Torre, then on the Norwegian model. Is this reliant on low oil prices?
No, absolutely not. We decided to launch low-cost long haul when oil prices were above $100. So the business case is not based on that. Of course, we regard the airline industry a growth industry. It's driven by improving economies, growth in GDP. It's a growth market. And you can grow the market with setting up new direct routes, as we've done. You can set up, so it's availability also driving the market. So, of course, it's easier to grow the market faster if you have a low price tag. So
it's not reliant on it, but it would slow the growth.
It would probably slow the growth. It'd probably drive oil prices up, and then the market growth will be slower. And
right.
So it's easier to grow the market, of course, at $40 per barrel than 100.
With that very interesting answer, we will leave it there. I don't want to keep anybody from their lunch. So thank you very much to my panelists, and thank you for listening and for your questions.